Most double albums in the past have been generally bad because people can't seem to write enough good material for a double album.
Because I'm really pleased with it as something that was done like 7 years ago. It's a really good album, but as long as people are aware that it was made 7 years ago.
Robert Smith never fit anywhere. Too weird for the mainstream, too melodic for punk, too dark for pop, too pop for the underground. For over 40 years, he stood outside every category, wearing smudged lipstick and tangled hair, creating music that made sadness sound beautiful. The Cure became one of the most influential bands in rock history by refusing to be anything but themselves.
This is where half of my brain's saying, come on, say the right thing. Subsumed into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame despite all our best attempts.
But before Smith became the face of gothic melancholy, he was a teenager in Sussex spinning records in his bedroom. Those albums didn't just entertain him. They showed him that being different was possible, that you could be sensitive and still be powerful. That sadness deserved anthems just as much as happiness did. Smith never chased cool. He chased feeling. The albums that moved him weren't always the critically acclaimed masterpieces. They were the ones that understood loneliness, longing, and the strange comfort of beautiful sadness. Records that proved you weren't alone in feeling like an outsider.
I've loved the band and the albums game. It's we're kind of used to it at a lower level. I mean, when we play shows, it's
music that made the darkness less frightening by admitting it existed. These 7 albums built the foundation for everything The Cure became. They taught Smith how to turn pain into poetry, how to make despair danceable. Here are the records that shaped the king of beautiful misery. 7. The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars.
Then I knew he was not lying.
Robert Smith heard Ziggy Stardust in 1972 and realized you could be anything you wanted.
Like, to me, it's like 2 albums fighting against each other, and I probably should have had the courage, which at the time I wanted to make it a double album.
Bowie wasn't just making music. He was creating a character, a world, a complete transformation. Starman played on the radio like a transmission from another planet. Suffragette City exploded with glam rock energy. 5 years opened with apocalyptic dread that somehow felt hopeful. For a young Smith growing up in suburban England, this album was permission. Permission to wear makeup. Permission to be theatrical. Permission to reject the boring version of masculinity everyone expected. Bowie showed that rock stars didn't have to be tough guys. They could be aliens, poets, outsiders, broadcasting from the fringes. What Smith loved most was how Bowie balanced beauty and danger. The songs were catchy enough for radio, but weird enough to make you feel like you discovered something secret. Rock and Roll Suicide closed the album with devastating emotion, proving that spectacle and sincerity could live in the same song. Ziggy Stardust taught Smith that image and music weren't separate. They were parts of the same vision. When Smith later painted his face and teased his hair into that iconic mess, Bowie's influence was obvious, but it wasn't copying. It was understanding that presentation mattered, that creating a visual identity helped communicate the music's emotional truth. Bowie made it okay to be strange, and Smith never forgot that gift. 6. Electric Ladyland. Smith discovered Electric Ladyland as a teenager and heard guitar playing that sounded like emotions made visible.
For you, so don't you be late.
Released in 1968, this double album showed Hendrix at his most experimental. Voodoo Child stretched blues into psychedelic epics. All Along the Watchtower took Dylan's song and made it apocalyptic. Burning of the Midnight Lamp floated in reverb and melancholy. What grabbed Smith wasn't the technical brilliance, though Hendrix had plenty. It was the atmosphere.
But this is kind of different, It's these people who are suddenly saying, this is such a great thing. And
Electric Ladyland created entire worlds through sound. The guitar didn't just play notes, it wept, screamed, and whispered. Hendrix used effects and studio techniques to paint with music, turning songs into immersive experiences rather than just catchy tunes. Smith heard possibilities in that approach. The Cure's later albums would drench guitars in chorus and delay, creating sonic landscapes that felt bigger than the instruments playing them. That came directly from listening to Hendrix treat the studio as an instrument itself. Production wasn't just about capturing performance, it was about creating an atmosphere. Electric Ladyland also showed Smith that you could be a guitar hero without being aggressive. Hendrix played with sensitivity and nuance, not just power and speed. Little Wing demonstrated that a few perfect notes meant more than 1,000 fast ones. Smith, who never considered himself a virtuoso guitarist, learned that feeling always beats technique. Hendrix made his guitar sing in ways that connected emotionally, and that's what Smith chased in his own playing. 5. The Velvet Underground. The Velvet Underground's 1967 debut was everything rock wasn't supposed to be. Slow, droning, uncomfortable. Sunday Morning opened with Gentle Beauty. Then Heroin followed with 6 minutes of addiction and despair. Femme Fatale was deceptively pretty. Venus in Furs explored darkness most bands wouldn't touch. Lou Reed sang about drugs, paranoia, and urban decay without glamorizing any of it. Smith loved how the album refused to entertain in the traditional sense. It wasn't trying to make you feel good.
And enjoy it, I would still pick up a guitar and play, so I'd still end up being a musician.
It was trying to make you feel something real, even if that something was uncomfortable. The Velvet Underground proved that rock could be art, that it could explore the shadows without offering easy solutions or happy endings. Nico's voice added an icy detachment that made the sadness even more powerful. All Tomorrow's Parties described loneliness at a party, the universal feeling of being surrounded by people and still feeling completely alone. Smith understood that feeling deeply. The Cure would spend decades exploring similar territory, making anthems for the isolated and misunderstood. What the Velvet Underground taught Smith was artistic bravery. They made exactly the music they wanted, knowing most people wouldn't get it. The album barely sold when it first came out, but it influenced everyone who heard it. Smith learned that commercial success and artistic integrity didn't have to align. You could make uncompromising music and trust that the right people would find it eventually. 4. The Doors. While everyone focused on The Doors' debut, Smith was obsessed with Strange Days from 1967. The album was darker, weirder, more willing to get lost in its own atmosphere. Strange Days opened with keyboards that sounded like anxiety. People Are Strange became an outsider anthem. When the Music's Over built for 11 minutes into something overwhelming and cathartic. Jim Morrison's lyrics spoke to Smith's teenage alienation. Morrison wrote about feeling disconnected, about watching life through glass, about darkness as both threat and comfort. He wasn't offering answers or optimism. He was documenting what it felt like to be young and confused and searching for meaning in a world that didn't make sense. Ray Manzarek's keyboards created most of the album's atmosphere. Without a bass player, The Doors relied on keyboard bass lines and Robbie Krieger's guitar to fill space. The result was music that felt hypnotic and dreamlike. Songs drifted and circled rather than marching forward. Smith absorbed that approach, understanding that mood mattered as much as melody. Strange Days showed Smith that rock could be poetic without being pretentious. Morrison's lyrics were literary, but never academic. They came from genuine feeling, not showing off. When Smith later wrote songs like Pictures of You or Plain Song, creating emotional landscapes through words and sound, The Doors' influence echoed through every note. Music could transport you somewhere else if you let it breathe and build properly. 3. Siouxsie and the Banshees. By 1978, punk had already started repeating itself. Then Siouxsie and the Banshees released the scream and showed there was another way forward. The album took punk's raw energy and added a gothic atmosphere, art school experimentation, and Siouxsie Sue's fierce presence. Jigsaw Feeling opened with tribal drums and jagged guitars. Carcass celebrated ugliness as beauty. Suburban Relapse captured small-town suffocation perfectly. Smith heard his future in this album. The Banshees proved you could be punk without being simple. You could have attitude and artistry simultaneously. The guitars scraped and echoed instead of just bashing chords. The songs created tension without always releasing it. Everything felt dangerous but controlled, chaotic but intentional. Siouxsie herself was a revelation. A woman leading a band with complete authority, refusing to be sexualized or diminished. Her voice was powerful, strange, uncompromising. She sang with the same fearlessness male punk singers had, but with more interesting ideas about melody and delivery. The scream became a direct template for early Cure albums. The scratchy guitar textures, the prominent bass lines, the way drums drove songs without overwhelming them. Smith studied this album like a textbook. Three Imaginary Boys, The Cure's debut, wouldn't exist without the scream showing that post-punk could be dark, artistic, and still visceral. The Banshees opened a door, and Smith walked through it carrying everything he'd learned from them. 2. The Beatles. Revolver from 1966 caught Smith at exactly the right moment. He'd grown up with Beatles music everywhere, but this album was different.
In a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door.
Eleanor Rigby used strings to tell a story about loneliness. Tomorrow Never Knows sounded like the future invading the present. Here, there, and everywhere was impossibly beautiful. I'm Only Sleeping captured the mood of not wanting to face the world. What Smith loved was how the Beatles balanced experimentation with emotion. They used backward tapes, Indian instruments, orchestral arrangements, studio trickery, but never forgot the song itself. The innovations served the feeling, not the other way around. You could appreciate the craft or just get lost in the melody. Both approaches worked, for no one particularly struck Smith. A song about a relationship ending, told with devastating simplicity. Paul McCartney sang about love dying quietly, not with drama, but with sad resignation. The French horn solo was heartbreaking. Smith learned that sadness didn't always need to be loud or theatrical. Sometimes quiet devastation hit harder. Revolver taught Smith that pop music could be sophisticated without losing its accessibility. The Cure's biggest hits, Just Like Heaven, Friday I'm in Love, Love Song, channeled that Beatles' ability to craft perfect melodies that also meant something deeper. You could make radio-friendly music that didn't insult anyone's intelligence. The Beatles proved that great songwriting was about connecting emotionally while taking creative risks. 1. Leonard Cohen. This was the one.
I'd buy a beggar on his knee, or I'd crawl to your bed.
Leonard Cohen's 1967 debut changed how Robert Smith understood music could work. Cohen barely sang in the traditional sense. His voice was deep, conversational, almost monotone. But the words, the melodies, the aching sadness of it all. This was poetry set to the simplest possible arrangements. Suzanne floated on acoustic guitar and wisdom. So Long, Marianne captured love and goodbye simultaneously. Hey, That's No Way to Say Goodbye made heartbreak sound gentle. Smith realized you didn't need to scream to communicate pain. Cohen whispered his despair, and somehow it landed harder than any punk band's rage. The arrangements were sparse, letting every word breathe and land. Nothing competed with the lyrics. The music supported the message without overwhelming it. Cohen wrote about love, loss, spirituality, and darkness with literary sophistication, but emotional directness. He didn't hide behind metaphors when simple truth would cut deeper. Master Song and Stories of the Street explored human complexity without judgment. Cohen observed life's sadness without trying to fix it or explain it away. Robert Smith built The Cure from these foundations. Bowie's theatricality, Hendrix's atmosphere, the Velvet Underground's bravery, the Doors' poetry, Siouxsie's darkness, the Beatles' craft, and Cohen's vulnerable honesty. 7 albums that taught him sadness could be beautiful. That being different was powerful. That outsiders deserved anthems too. If these records moved you, subscribe and share your own. Sometimes the saddest songs save our lives.